Leitmotifs are like the cool older brother of music theory concepts. There are tons of examples of leitmotifs in film and game music, of small musical ideas that represent a character or theme in a larger work, and almost as many examples of essays, YouTube videos, and forum posts breaking down examples of leitmotifs in our favorite soundtracks and analyzing how they contribute to our favorite stories. Today I want to take a bit of a different approach and talk about how to write a leitmotif, or what musical qualities separate the cool older brother motifs from the snotty younger brother dweebs. Of course, the effectiveness of a leitmotif in a piece of media is going to be dependent on the story it is accompanying, how emotionally resonant the story is with its audience, and how well the musical idea fits the tone and emotions that the story is trying to convey. But from a strictly compositional standpoint, there are certain ways that leitmotifs can be more or less effective. The best leitmotifs have a clear identity that allow the listener to recognize them easily, even as the musical setting around it changes, or even as the motif itself transforms over the course of a film or game to mirror the changes in the characters, plot, or setting. A great leitmotif will be easily transformed in many different ways without ever losing the recognizable association to the original musical idea. In order to explore the different ways to approach writing leitmotifs, let's take a look at the second generation of Pokémon Mystery Dungeon games, Explorers of Darkness, Time, and Sky. The soundtrack to these games is rich with tons of different recurring motifs, but in this video I'll just be talking about three big ones that I'll call the Darkness, Time, and Sky motifs. Let's take a listen to the game's intro music and I'll show you what I'm talking about. The first leitmotif I want to talk about is introduced right at the beginning of the game's intro and is a perfect example of one of the most powerful tools a composer has when constructing a leitmotif: contour. This three-note idea is super simple. There's no memorable rhythm to it, but it has a very dramatic contour, a leap of a major third down and then a major seventh up. You don't want an idea that's so common as to be unrecognizable. If your leitmotif is three notes descending down a scale in eighth note rhythm, for example, then you won't ever be able to tell if a piece is using this leitmotif or not because that kind of musical motion happens all the time. This leap of a major seventh is rare to find in music generally and stands out to the listener's ear, making it a perfect candidate for a leitmotif. You can see this motif in its pure form in a few different tracks throughout the game, each presenting the most basic form of transformation that a leitmotif can undertake: transposition to a new key. In each of the following examples, the basic leitmotif is stated in one key and then repeated in the key a minor third above. The notes are different, but because the structure of intervals is the same in both keys, we easily recognize it as the same musical idea. For a leitmotif to be able to adapt to meet a number of different musical requirements, it's important to be able to make more drastic transformations to the motif without losing its recognizable quality. The leap of a major seventh is dissonant and lends itself well to these kinds of ominous or suspicious musical situations. But what if we want to use this motif in a different emotional context? This is where contour comes in. The general shape of a melodic line can be just as recognizable as the specific interval structure. This darkness motif has a simple but notable contour, a small leap down followed by a big leap up. Once we've been familiarized with the original motif, any transformation that retains this basic contour should be able to be recognized as a variation on that original motif. In For a New Life, we see the original form of the motif alternated with a less dissonant transformation, a leap down of a fourth followed by a leap up of an octave. It's easy to hear the relation between these two forms because they're played side by side, highlighting the consistent contour between the two lines. This allows for motivic consistency while presenting a totally new musical feeling. Down a Dark Path, which plays as you approach the game's final boss, uses this motif for an effect that's less creepy and suspicious and more straight-up menacing. It achieves this by transforming the leitmotif to outline the notoriously unstable and unnatural-sounding augmented triad. Again, the interval structure is altered to allow for this change, but the small leap down, larger leap up contour remains intact. This allows the music to access the emotional qualities of the augmented triad while also accessing the player's association with this darkness leitmotif, which is already one of suspicion and foreboding at this point in the game. This smart use of motivic consistency maximizes the effect that this musical cue is trying to achieve. The second leitmotif I want to talk about is introduced at the end of the game's intro theme and is a perfect example of one of the most powerful tools a composer has when using a leitmotif: harmony. The harmony underpinning a motif can drastically alter how the motif sounds and feels, and writing a leitmotif that can easily accept several different harmonizations allows the composer to put the motif in a wider variety of musical scenarios. From this perspective, the time motif is excellently conceived. Instead of using common melodic ideas like arpeggios and scalar motion that could lock you into a specific tonality, these two alternating phrases are instead built entirely with fifths and seconds. This is unusual for a melody, which helps make it recognizable, another desirable quality for a leitmotif. This is what we in the biz call a 2-for-1. Let's look at the pure version of the motif as found in the track Time Gear. This track evokes the ancient mystical quality of the time gears with alternating A sus2 and G sus2 chords, and the time leitmotif accentuates the atmosphere created by the harmony by avoiding any telling thirds or sevenths that would change each chord's color. The second of each chord is especially emphasized by the motif being placed on the downbeat of each chord at the highest melodic point of each phrase. The following leaps down accent the fifth, which is a harmonically neutral chord tone, briefly passing by either the fourth or the sixth. Slightly more colorful chord tones, but not enough to give anything away. The time motif here is being used to accentuate the sound of the sus2 harmony. The exact same melody is used to completely different effect in the time restored theme, harmonized by alternating G major 7 and F major 7 chords. These chords contrast the arcane energy generated by our previous sus2 chord sounds with a lush, warm, and inviting feeling, completely transforming the effect of the exact same motif. This effect in large part is a result of how the melody interacts with these chords. Instead of avoiding all the color notes of each chord, this time the melody lands squarely on all of the most colorful notes. The 3rd, 6th, and 5th over the G major 7, and the 3rd, 6th, and major 7th over the F chord. The accompanying string parts add additional chord extensions to the mix, filling out the sound of the piece in a beautiful way. Even subtle differences between two pieces of music can change each piece's emotional effect. Later on in the Time Gear theme, the same time motif is harmonized with an F major 7 chord moving to an E7 sus. The first phrase accentuates the sharp 11th of the F major chord before moving down to the major 7th, giving the phrase a vibrant Lydian sound. Over the E7 sus chord, the 4th and flat 7th are highlighted by the melody, accentuating the unresolved sus quality of the chord. Combined, this section has a very floaty, ethereal quality where neither chord feels very resolved to. Contrast this with the Time Gear remix theme, where the same melody is harmonized by an extremely similar chord progression, C major 7 add 4 to B minor 9. Unlike the floatiness of the previous F to E sus example, this progression definitely feels like it resolves to this B minor chord, giving the whole phrase a much darker tone. This is mostly due to where the melody sits in relation to these chords. The first phrase highlights the major 3rd and 7th of the C chord, which are clear characteristic chord tones of C major, but the string pads underneath the melody spell out a C sus chord. The melody is at odds with the harmony, and together they create this very unstable C major 7 add 4 chord. When the music shifts to B minor, the melody highlights again the 3rd and 7th of the chord, but this time it works together with the pads below it to give a clear B minor sound, with the 9th adding a stab of color. Moving from this unstable space to a more stable space is what creates this feeling of resolution, and having this point of resolution on this rich minor chord is what tinges the whole section with a darker color when compared to our previous example. It's not just the different ways you can harmonize a passage that affect how we perceive a motif. It's the way that that motif interacts with the harmony that brings out the whole range of subtle, specific emotional qualities that music can address. The third and final leitmotif I want to talk about is introduced in the middle of the game's intro theme and is a perfect example of one of the most powerful tools a game has when constructing a leitmotif: phrasing. Being able to fit one leitmotif in a wide variety of musical settings means being able to phrase the motif in a variety of different ways without losing its identity. Stretching out the intervals of a motif or changing the underlying harmony is all well and good, but the really big changes come when you start messing with the whole structure of the pieces themselves. Melodic structure, rhythmic subdivision, harmonic rhythm, all of these things add up in different ways to give us the limitless variety of emotional expression that music makes available to us. This final sky motif is perfectly composed to keep its melodic identity intact even in all of the various forms that it takes throughout the soundtrack. For the pure form of this leitmotif, let's look at the intro music that was included just in Explorers of Sky. This grand, adventurous melody is played in a straightforward quarter-note march rhythm so as not to distract from the melodic structure. This distinctive sequence of leaps up of a fourth, second, and minor third that resolve down by a half step. This melody is memorable because it has an inherent dramatic curve to it. You can see how it clearly outlines a major triad arpeggio, but with the characteristic major third scale degree delayed by a little enclosure as we jump up from the second to the fourth before resolving nicely down to our third. This initial leap puts the tonic triad in our ears, then the short detour to the second and fourth of the key take us away from the tonic and build a little tension. The following resolution down to the third returns us to our tonic chord and releases the built-up tension, telling a short little story in just these 2 bars. This is really strong melodic writing that ensures the motif will be recognizable in a huge variety of different musical transformations. The harmony puts a little twist on this resolution to our third by making the bass drop down by a whole step, giving us a secondary dominant B-flat 7 over A-flat chord that wants to resolve to the 4 chord E-flat. And that's exactly what it does. Notice how in sync the melody and harmony are here. The melody very clearly outlines this 4 chord as well as the B-flat over F to F move that follows. Remember this structure because it'll become important later. We alternate between the chords that feel resolved to on bars 1 and 3 and the tense chords that want to resolve on bars 2 and 4, giving a nice push-pull to the piece that works really, really well. I love how smooth the bass line makes this feel, inverting the middle 2 chords to give us this nice stepwise walk down from the root to the 5th. The top menu theme draws a totally different feel out of this same motif by phrasing it in a totally different way. The melody notes are the same, the harmony is the same, but the rhythm, tempo, and style are completely different. Our straight 4/4 marching rhythm is traded for a slow 6/8 time signature, with the melody lazily drifting along in dotted eighth notes over top of the string accompaniment. The duple rhythm of the melody over the triplet rhythm of the accompaniment gives this theme a laid-back feeling that nicely contrasts the upbeat, adventurous mood of the Leitmotifs' original form. Afterwards, we get another iteration of this motif up a minor third, in the key of E-flat major. Only this time, the 4 and 5 chords are replaced with the flat 6 and flat 7. The melody is altered not just to fit over these new chords, but to augment their effect. The dramatic build-up to a resolution back to E-flat is heightened by the melody creeping up to an extremely high range, resolving nicely with the harmony to the current tonic E-flat chord at the melody's highest point. The original title screen theme for Explorers of Time and Darkness gives us another iteration of the sky motif, and is a great example of how to play with the structure of a passage like this. Whereas our previous examples had the harmonic structure of a tonic chord on bars 1 and 3 moving to a tense chord on bars 2 and 4, this version flips that structure around by having the harmony resolve on the second and fourth bars of the melody. Hear just how different this melody feels as the tonic C chord is approached with an interesting flat 6 minor 5 1 cadence. The melody here veers off into a new direction from the original iteration. The contour is altered with this 5th falling an octave from its original form, then moving to outline a minor 4 chord rather than a major 4 chord by way of some scalar decoration. After resolving back up to the tonic in bar 4, something closer to the original version of the motif comes in a minor third up in the key of E-flat major. The same flat 6 minor 5 to 1 cadence from before kicks it off, but the tone soon changes as our new tonic E-flat shifts to E-flat minor, with the melody highlighting this shift by emphasizing the flat third of the chord. The contour of the original melody is kept intact, but it now outlines the harmony, an E-flat minor 6 to B-flat over D resolution. See how the second bar of melody was taken and shifted upwards, the notes changing to adapt to the chord progression, but always pushing up higher in range to build the intensity to a climax. These kinds of quick tonal shifts and big builds are great for intro music like this, which is trying to grab the listener's attention and prepare them for what kind of music to expect from the game while getting them excited to start their adventure. And this section does all of this without writing any brand new material besides transforming this sky leitmotif. I want to end off by talking about Life Goes On, one of the ending themes from the game, which uses all of the types of transformations that I've gone over in this video at the same time. The sky motif is used in a brand new, totally kick-ass musical setting. The contour is kept intact to keep it recognizable, but the melody is altered by replacing the 4th to 3rd resolution with a 6th moving down to a 5th. This is done to accentuate a brand new harmonization, a super cool sounding B-flat 7 sus to C7 sus vamp. Notice how the shift in melody is done to outline the 4th and flat 7th of the C7 sus chord, the two essential chord tones to get that sus chord sound. The phrasing is completely different from the original form as well. The whole motif is shifted over to start on bar 2 of the phrase, lining up this melodic resolution to hit right with the change of chord. Let's hear the final result of all these changes. Where the original title theme used this motif as a way to build expectation for a grand adventure, this iteration of the same motif feels like an epic conclusion to our journey as we barrel unflinchingly toward the end of the game. Bookending the intro and outro music with the same motif causes the players to reflect on everything that they've been through between these 2 points in their journey, and seeing that old motif in this totally new form underscores how much we've changed over the course of playing the game. That is the real power of leitmotifs. The music in these games is so great at accentuating the feelings that you're supposed to be having at every point throughout the game, and using the same motifs to convey all of these different musical emotions with gives a cohesiveness to the game's music. Each new iteration of these leitmotifs is simultaneously something fresh and something familiar, and that familiarity lends depth to every new piece that we come across. There's a ton of motifs and references that I left out of this video, so if you know the game's soundtrack, leave a comment with your favorite example of a leitmotif from the game below. Big shout out to patron KM Music for requesting this video and supplying some transcriptions for me to analyze. If you're interested, check out their channel to find some cool orchestral arrangements of Pokémon Mystery Dungeon tunes. If you're interested in supporting this channel, feel free to check out my Patreon page here, follow me on Twitter here, or tell your friends that these videos are not that bad. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.